everybody, welcome back to Elvis Junction Reviews. Today we're looking at another product from Athearn. We're looking at an Athearn Genesis GP9, and this is Central of Georgia, number 170. As you can see, it has LED lighting and Tsunami 2. Here it is in its lovely Athearn Genesis box. We're not going to waste any time, and let's get this out of its box. Hope everybody's having a good day today. My day's been pretty interesting. This just came in the mail. You're probably wondering why Central of Georgia. Well, the reasoning for that I will get into when we are in the history. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you have your basics. There is your diesel locomotive sound guide. So basically, like if I scroll to the right page, there we go. Those are functions, so we'll be able to look at that later. And then here is our exploded diagram, not just for the GP9, but GP7 and GP18, because they were all roughly, they looked almost the same. The only difference really was the horsepower in them. And there is a little bag right here that has some extra parts like this, for instance. That is some extra steps, like walkway steps. So let's move this out of the way. Hope this is all in frame. Yes, it is. Tiny little thing. Oh, and if you are curious, it says this is a delicate model. We recommend opening the package by setting it on a tabletop or carefully sliding the outer sleeve. They only do this on the smaller, like 4-axle units. I don't know why, but that's just what they do. Now, the thing about this locomotive is that they say that this part right here, where the dynamic brakes should go, that's where the decoder is. So if you move this, you might possibly drop the locomotive. And that's what they're saying. Let's get that out of here. And there's a couple of pieces of foam here to protect the handrails from bending in a horrible shape. Okay. And with that out of the way, let's get on to some history. And now, onto some history. The Central of Georgia purchased 11 GP9s in 2 orders. The first 6 were delivered in November of 1956, while the other 5 were delivered in April of 1957. Between the 2 orders, there are differences primarily with the frame and fuel tanks. All were assigned to the general freight pool, and they would serve until the very end. Now, Central Georgia 170 was the last locomotive delivered in the gray and blue paint scheme. What happened to it? I don't know. I could not find any information on this locomotive, so I can only presume that it has been scrapped. All right, with history out of the way, let's get into some details, starting with the front. All right, so we're looking at the front of the locomotive, and we're going to start at the top and work our way down to the bottom, as we always do. Starting at the top, you can just see it. There is a grab iron here on the roof of the locomotive. Next to it is a sand filler hatch, which we cannot see, but we will be able to see it once we are looking at the top of the locomotive. We have 2 class lights, one right here, as well as one right there. There is the main headlight, and then we have our number boards here and here. Unfortunately, they do not light up when power is applied, and what I think is a little silly is that they are not asymmetrical. The gap is on the inside on this side, but on this side it's on the outside, so I think it's kind of funny, but it does make the locomotive more unique. We have grab irons that lead from the top of the locomotive down to the walkway. We have our Central of Georgia logo with the orange wings, and I just smacked the handrail by accident, my bad. There's another grab iron just right here. You cannot see it, but behind this footplate is the walkway light. And we have what appears to be a couple of MU sockets here and here. There is a widthwise grab iron just above the coupler cut bar, which you can see right here. This locomotive has 4 MU cables on either side of the knuckle here, and here. There is the knuckle. You can see the coupler cut bar right here. And there's a couple of yellow steps here, and you can see the air brake hose right there. All right, so let's look at it looks exactly the same on the rear. So we're not specifically looking at the rear of the locomotive. It literally looks the exact same. The only difference being the number board placements. This is how it should look on the front, but it doesn't. And the other difference is that the handbrake is, come on, focus, is right there. All right, so let's look at some side detail. Looking at the conductor's side of the locomotive, we're going to start at the front and work our way backwards. And the front here, you can see the yellow steps that lead up to the forward walkway. There's a big yellow F to indicate this is the front of the locomotive. Now, early GPs, and also the SD7s and the SD9s, they looked pretty much the same on the front and the rear. So some railroads would end up adopting the long hood forward running, specifically like the Norfolk Western and the Southern. The only downside to running long hood forward would be visibility and not being able to see around curves, so visibility. So a lot of railroads ultimately decided to run short hood forward instead of long hood forward, getting away from the classic steam engine practice. Anyway, as we move along here, you can see the lovely yellow handrails that are made out of a flexible plastic, so they can bend a little bit, but that does mean there's a possibility of deforming. Like for instance, right here, it is deformed out of shape, which is a bit of a shame. As we move along here, we can see a windshield wiper right here. You can see some electrical boxes here, and below the cab. We also have our number 170. There is the EMD builder plate right there, which is very cool indeed. You can, see the truck detail, as well as these older versions of springs and the sand lines here, as well as there. And you can see the windows have slid out of place once again. That is a nightmare. I really wish that companies would stop doing these slidable windshields. It drives me up a wall. It might look realistic, but once you put it back in the box, it will move because the locomotive's on its side. Anyway, as we move the locomotive along forward, you can see the small fuel tank of this locomotive. It is rather small, but then again, it probably didn't travel that far, especially on the central of Georgia. But I don't know their mileage. I don't know what the mileage was, but I can only assume. We have another windshield wiper right here, a couple of grates for the exhaust right here. Now, I should also mention that the GP7 and the GP9s were essentially the same as their F-unit counterparts. They just had the same motor. They were just the freight version of the F-units. We have our Central Georgia logo right here, as well as the air tank reservoirs for the brakes. You can just see it, but those are the exhaust ports right here and also right there. We will get into those when we look at the roof. As we move the locomotive forward once again, you can see the number 170 and the truck detail once again. And there's a safety placard right here. It's pretty much the same on the engineer's side. I don't believe there's much of a difference. The only difference that I could find was this yellow grab iron right here. Oh, and we can actually get a better look at that. Not even. There it is. You can see the handbrake right there. All right, so let's look at the roof. Looking at the roof of the locomotive, and the nice thing is because it's a smaller locomotive, I don't have to really zoom in. So starting over here at the front of the short end, you can now finally see the sand filler hatch right here next to the grab iron. There is the Hancock air whistle, which has a very unique sound. The only other locomotives that I'm aware of that had these air whistles were the FL9s that the New Haven and then the Metro North also ran, as well as Amtrak. My light just flickered. There's the roof of the cab, and you can see the radiator fans here for the engine, 2 here as well as 2 there. There is another air whistle right here, and there are the exhaust ports here and here. And then you can also see the rear sand filler hatch and the rear grab iron on the roof of the locomotive. And there's a series of lift rings on the roof as well. All right, so now let's get into let's get into the sound demo. Okie dokie, so we're here on the test track, and as you can see, it is changed quite drastically. And I want to quickly explain what's going on. So, I took some pieces of foam, and I cut them, and then I sculpted this at an angle. This will be covered in like large rocks that you would see, for instance, like on the side of a river that keep the riverbed or like the river bank from eroding away. So essentially, this is almost like a levee in series, but it's not. It's just raised so that it doesn't ruin people's view. Actually, it kind of does ruin these houses' views. But regardless, I'm hoping that it'll look like I'm imagining in my head. So it will be updated over time as we continue to do our reviews and we continue to use this test track. But I'm hoping it will look very nice. Anyway, so we have the locomotive here on the test track, and let's go ahead and apply some power. And I should also mention that the GP7 and the GP9s were not turbocharged. It was just straight the engine, and it was pretty decent horsepower back in the day. I mean, the GP9 was one of the most successfully sold diesel locomotives in the world, with over 4,000 being built, if I'm correct. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, F0 is the main headlight, as you see it is on. F1 is the bell. Sounds very nice. A little staticky though when it finally hits that high note on the bell. F2 is a long horn. And that is the air chime of the Hancock. Now you will notice that it might appear that the main headlight is flickering on your screen. Do not worry, that is an FPS issue. That is not going on right now. That is strictly an FPS issue, frames per second. LEDs flash at a very high frame rate, faster than the human eye can comprehend. However, when you slow it down to 60 frames per second, you can see that flash. Anyway, F3 is a short horn. Now, F4 is the dynamic brakes or straight to idle. I don't believe I'll be able to get that. Well, also, this locomotive has no dynamic brakes. It is dynamic brakeless. So it would be straight to idle. Now, F5, I believe, does nothing. Neither does F6. Those are extra lighting effects if they are available. F7 it will dim the main headlight, and it will also activate cruise chatter. You can just hear it. Now F8 will mute it. And there's a few other things, like for instance, we're going to switch over here. F15 is the handbrake. So you can hear them cranking away. And then if I hit it again, once it's done making these noises, it should release. Yep. Now this locomotive has no HEP, so we'll be able to ignore that. We're going to go straight to, actually if I hit F23, it says the all aboard. Let's see what happens.
All aboard.
Yep. And the doors should close.
All aboard.
Nope, you're just going to say all aboard. All right. Now here comes another fun part. F26, the air compressor is going off. F26 and F27 are engine RPM notch up and notch down. This is essentially the tsunami version of Loke Sound's drive hold. So, let's say you want to simulate a heavy grade or a heavy train and you're starting. You're going to have to throw it into notch 8 in real life, and that means you're going to have a very loud engine. So I'm going to go ahead and start spamming F26 till we get it full up to notch 8. Actually, I learned that you don't need to spam it, just press it and leave it on. And then we're gonna hit F27 and it should go all the way on. In fact, it will turn the prime mover off. But it seems on F27, I need to actually multi-tap the button to actually get it to turn off. Yep. All right, so let's hit F26 again. And once it starts up, I'm gonna do a quick back, forth, come back, and we will cut to the end of the video. So, we're going to actually throw into, we're going forward, my bad. Throw that on. I'm going to start moving here. She's not going to be able to go past your entire screen, unfortunately. Don't have that much test track. There we go. All right, we'll bring her back here. And we'll try to bring her back into frame. Excuse my floors. All right, so let's go ahead and turn off F0, and we will turn off main power. And now let's get into my final thoughts. So overall, I think this is a very good looking locomotive. It looks great and also sounds great. It certainly has a lot better detail than the GP7U that I reviewed like at least a year ago. If you may recall, that was lacking in detail, and some people in the comments even said so, and I have to agree with that. I think also just because this was a slightly newer model and also just had better tooling. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe if you have not, and hit that notification bell to see what I have to upload next in the future. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.